Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Conquering My Collection. You'll have to forgive my voice and maybe the not the cadence, the speed or lack thereof of my speech in this video because I've been filming quite a few videos at this point. Really want to do this one. It's gonna take ages no matter what I do, so buckle in. It's gonna be a long one. This is gonna be just an update, a Blu-ray update of the stuff that I've been watching in my collection. And I guess I want to briefly, before we get into this, briefly, it's me, tell you what I've been doing. So, about 2 months ago, a bit longer maybe, I really wanted to challenge myself. So I've been doing the Blu-ray Roulette series where I go on the letterbox watch list and hit random, hit shuffle, and whatever the film is, I watch it and talk about it in the video. I love doing that. It was so exciting, so fun. And then I kind of moved my collection downstairs, was in a bit of a limbo for a while, and did a couple more and stuff. But I was like, I just want to start watching stuff, and I feel like I'm being held back. So I can't remember what it was. I just thought, I'm gonna watch this, and I thought, and then what if I just try and watch something tomorrow as well? And I thought to myself, what if I just try and watch a film a day, even if it's a short film, because my watch list is like 1,000 films long, literally. You know, there's a lot of short films on there, and I thought even if it's just a short film, I just get a film done every day, and so that's what I've been doing. And I think I just hit 70 days now. I was almost going to wait until 100 before making this video, but I've really enjoyed it. It's been awesome. It's been fantastic, and it's justified my collection 3 times over already. And I've seen things that obviously I knew I'd be kind of interested in because that's why I bought them, but it's always surprises, and oh, this isn't quite how I thought it would be. It's better, or it's more interesting, or whatever it happens to be. So I've watched a ton of short films, a big chunk of feature films, and so I've got a big stack of stuff. I'm going to kind of just go through Blu-ray update style and kind of give you some of my thoughts on. The sad thing about this is that I could probably do individual videos on every single one of these and have at least 20 to 30 minutes of material in terms of what I'd like to say about it in terms of the film and all sorts of other things. I just don't have the time. So it was almost tailor-made for this series, the Conquering My Collection thing. But I'm just going to have to let go of the fact that I'm not going to be able to make individual videos for every single one of these films. And some of these will be in upcoming videos, like the Epic Film Challenge 2, for example. There's at least 2 that I'll review properly for that series, but this is just kind of a brief overview of what I've been watching and stuff. And I've already mentioned some of these. I think there's a couple that I've already gone over. So this isn't like this isn't in order. It's not really a comp, and I've completely stacked them out of order as well. So this isn't even an order of when I watch them or anything like that. It's just these are all the ones that I've watched over the past 70 odd days. And one thing I was really proud of myself for was I went to Norway recently, and I thought, wow, fuck, there's like 10 days there where I can't watch Blu-rays because you're around family and stuff, and I'm gonna sit around watching movies all day, and there's a certain kind of social energy that needs to go into that, and then especially when you don't speak the language or that well. Or at all, I understand Norwegian more than I speak it, and it's unfortunate. But so going over there, I knew I wasn't gonna be able to sit down and watch Blu-rays. But I thought, what if I like rip some silent short films? So I kept myself going with a steady diet of Harold Lloyd stuff while I was over in Norway, just for bed, little 20-minute shorts, and so I kept it going. And I actually removed some films from my watch list, like all the train movies I'm going to do for an upcoming video. I removed all the Jackie Chan movies because I'm going to do a marathon of those at some point as well. And I thought, okay, so that's giving me like 14 free days where I don't have to do one. And I can go to Norway and just relax. But I thought, well, I like the idea of it being a streak, one every day. So I've kept it up, and I'm kind of proud of that. And and I've been enjoying it. I've been loving it, in fact. So let's just get into this before my voice completely shatters. And see, I almost feel like you've been joining me, in real time over the past 2 videos I just filmed, but you're watching this fresh now, and I'm not fresh. So I feel like I'm dragging you down, even though the video has barely even begun. But let's just get into this. So this one is Peter or Dragon. I don't know if I precisely, because it would be Og or. I mean, there's different Norwegian pronunciations, I think. But Pete's Dragon, this is one I bought in Norway for about £2 or something many years ago. And that's norsk. That tells you that it's the Norwegian, it has a Norwegian soundtrack on it, but it does have the English version as well, and a ton of extras as well. There's like a director's diary, which is really good on this. But Pete's Dragon, this is from David Lowery, who is fast becoming one of my favorite. I said after seeing his first feature film in 2013 that he's one of my new favorite directors based on one film. It was called Ain't Them Bodies Saints, with Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck, who he later worked with again on A Ghost Story, I think it was called, in 2017, which had a lot of praise. I didn't love that film. I have mixed feelings. I want to return to it. The pie eating scene just drove me fucking nuts. But there was some haunting moments in that film, like truly stuff that sticks with you. But I need to give it another chance one day. Then he did The Old Man with the Gun with Robert Redford, which I feel like probably happened because he made this film with Robert Redford, and that's, I think, his final featuring starring role. I think that based on the nature of how Marvel works and when they film things years before they come out in the cinemas, his Robert Redford's final role is in Avengers Endgame, that very short cameo, but his final starring role, The Old Man with a Gun, or The Old Man and the Gun, great film. Such a good film. And then he's just come out with The Green Knight, which is getting a lot of praise. But his filmography is so varied in that sense. A Ghost Story couldn't really be much different. It couldn't be more different than something like Ain't Them Bodies Saints. And then you have this, Pete's Dragon. He went and made a Disney movie. I believe he went and pitched this to Disney, from what I understand. And it's one of those kind of live action. Well, again, you can't really call it a live-action remake because it was a live-action movie to begin with, from maybe the 70s or the 60s, where you had a young kid and his friend, this dragon, who was like a 2D animated character. And I used to watch that film when I was a kid. So one of those more obscure ones, I think, compared to some of the other live-action Disney classics, like maybe Mary Poppins, maybe Bedknobs and Broomsticks. I'm not sure how much that one is held in high regard, but Pete's Dragon I grew up with. I have very vague memories of it. It's like I'd love to watch it for a movie marathon with the guideline film you haven't seen since childhood, but Pete's Dragon I have very vague memories, and I just remember like a seaside town, a lighthouse, the kid being ginger maybe, and the green design of the dragon. So I was intrigued to see what this one was all about, and admittedly I have been looking, now that I'm doing the daily thing, I've been looking at what films I have that are like 90 minutes, and this is one of them. So I threw this on, and this is like a 5-star film to me. I absolutely adored this film. It was so emotionally moving by the third act and the ending. I just loved everything about it. I thought the kid was great. I thought the opening was fucking heartbreaking. The design of the dragon was brilliant, and you really felt for it. And I think there was something in the extras about David Lowery talking about maybe a cat. He has a cat or something like that, and they used cat-like mannerisms for the dragon, which I totally read, and it made it a lot more sympathetic to me. You got Carl Urban in this film, Bryce Dallas Howard, who gives a really good performance. She just radiates warmth in this film. And then you have Robert Redford, who's this guy who says that he saw the dragon when he was younger, and no one believes him, and he has such a mystical quality to him, just this proper like kind, again, warm grandfather figure, and I loved him in this film. But the two kids are great too, and that really makes it click on like a higher level than a normal family films, when the kids are really good. And I just loved it from start to finish. This is going to be one that I'd like to show to my future kids. Like, it's a fucking great family film. And I realized the kind of the weird juxtaposition of me saying great fucking family film. I had someone recently call me out on my swearing and said that I really enjoyed your review, but you ruined it with your crass language. And it's like, they're just words, The way I see swearing is use them for emphasis on something. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying them at all. But if you're using them against someone, I think that's when they can be more offensive. But no, it's a fucking great family film. Loved Pete's Dragon, and just bumped David Lowery even further into my kind of estimations as a director. There's another one I bought in Norway. These are all just kind of stacked completely out of order, as I've already mentioned. I don't know why I brought that up again. I apologize. Yeah, I bought this in like a bargain bin in Norway, in the middle of nowhere actually. It was like £2 or 20 Norwegian kroner. And this is a film from 2012, I believe, 2013. It says yeah, 2012 when the film came out. The layout and design of the Blu-ray was from 2013. This stars Frank Langella, don't know how you pronounce that. James Marsden, Liv Tyler, and Susan Sarandon. It's a really good cast. It's Robot and Frank. So this is about a man with beginning stages of dementia. Actually, I wouldn't even say beginning stages, but well, maybe that's spoiling things, but you're not quite sure how far he is with his dementia, and if it's, and he's really fighting against it. And his kids give him this robot to kind of help him out with things. He completely rejects it. You can see where it's going. But he used to be a thief. And so he starts to realize he can use this robot for future heists, even though he's getting on in his years. It's a delightful film, really funny, and some really good performances. And there's a twist in this that fucking punched me in the gut, and a beautiful performance from the two actors involved in that scene and the twist. But I really, really like this. This was a really, really good film. I would highly recommend it to people. And it's another one that's like 90 minutes or something. So it's, loved Robot and Frank. I think I already talked about these in a previous video, but I went through all of the Scorsese shorts. So Italian American, I waxed lyrical about that fucking phenomenal film where it's literally just Martin Scorsese interviewing his parents over an afternoon where they make him dinner and they just talk about their life. It's mainly his mother, and you can see all the mannerisms that he has and where he got them from her, and it's just it's such a fucking great documentary. You're gonna hear that word a lot in this video. American Boy. It doesn't have the full title here, but it's about this guy, this really unique character, and it's another one of those weird kind of set over a night. He brought the camera crew around to this house, and this guy that he knows, they interviewed him, and it literally begins with them in the house. Scorsese's there with some of his friends, they're drinking, and the doorbell rings, and there's this guy, this titular American boy, I forget his actual name. And the door opens, he stands there, and he just pounces on one of these guys. And they just start like having this, it's not really a fight, but they're wrestling. And it goes on for like 2 minutes. It's like, okay, now let's sit down and do the interview. And he tells these stories. There's a story this guy tells about when he killed someone, when he shot them in the chest. And I'm just like on the edge of my seat listening to this story. And it's just crazy. And so it's a really gripping documentary, American Boy. The Big Shave, kind of an interesting short film about a guy who just continually shaves until his face is all cut up and bleeding. It's Not Just You, Murray, which is a pretty good like primer for like what he would eventually do with films like Goodfellas. Like you can see the editing style and the storytelling style of like, well, there was this and there was that, and the narration stuff and the kind of snappy editing and things and telling a story in that kind of montage style starts with that film, I think, from 1964. And then 1963, What's a Nice Girl Like You Doing in a Place Like This, which I really loved, even though it's a little lacking in some respects, but just, again, you're seeing the first footsteps of a master of film, I think. So that this is, all told, a phenomenal release from Criterion, and all the films look great. But Italian American stole the show for me. That was fantastic. As I mentioned, I did watch some Harold Lloyd stuff when I was in Norway. So there's a couple more on the freshman Blu-ray that I don't have at hand. It's somewhere over there on the other shelf. So I watched Take a Chance from 1918, Young Mr. Jazz from 1919, and His Royal Slyness from 1920. And then on the Kid Brother Blu-ray, I watched Over the Fence, and That's Him. Now, Over the Fence was, I think that was the first film with the glasses character. And then That's Him was another early one, which is actually a lot of fun. I don't remember the specifics of a lot of them, I have to say. I think I wrote a couple of bits on some of them on Letterboxd, but definitely a mixed bag with all the Harold Lloyd shorts, but I've loved seeing them because I do neglect him when it comes to, the big three, I suppose. And I love Harold Lloyd. I really enjoy his films, and so I then actually went and watched the feature-length documentary from the 80s. I think it was made in 1989. Harold Lloyd, The Third Genius. That comes from Kevin Brownlow, and there was another man who worked with him on some of those documentaries, like the Buster Keaton. I forget what that one is called. Hard Act to Follow. So this is from 1989, feature-length documentary about Harold Lloyd's life and career. Fantastic, I loved it. All sorts of great home movie footage from his family and stuff, and yeah, fantastic feature-length documentary about Harold Lloyd. And I have enjoyed seeing some of the shorts, and you can really see like, okay, that director wasn't really doing the best stuff with Harold Lloyd, but that director really knew how to work with him, and this one's really good. And then Over the Fence, seeing like his first version of the Glasses character, and you learn in the documentary that he started out as a Chaplin impersonator, kind of. Not really, that's kind of like dumbing it down a bit, but he started his career, Harold Lloyd, by essentially doing a version of Chaplin's act, like even down to the walk and kind of the, basically just cashing in but on that kind of thing. But then he began to kind of morph it into his own style, and then the Glasses character kind of took off, and that became his thing, and he found his identity, and he made some fantastic films, and has always been underrated when it comes to the big three if you look at Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. I've only just started with this. I'm going to watch all of the short films. I'm going to watch everything on this release, to be fair, but this is the BFI release of Atoll K, and it has early silent films from both Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. So I've watched the first one with Oliver Hardy, which is from like 1914, Mother's Baby Boy, which was pretty rough, I mean, this is a film that's over 100 years old. And I mean rough in terms of just I mean, it's a very short film. There's not much going on, but it was a trip to see Oliver Hardy like that, that kind of young, I suppose. And he was still kind of. He just looks. I don't know. He looks exactly the same. Just there's no mustache, and his face is a little smoother. Like there's no thinner version of him. He just looks exactly the same in terms of weight and build and everything. But so I'm gonna watch more of those and see kind of their early beginnings before they joined up together. This is their final film they did together, which I haven't seen yet. But so that's another thing I'll be kind of resting on when it's a day that I don't have too much time. I can watch a short film, and I need a sip of water here because it's my throat is just dying. Yeah, I'm just not used to talking this much. I've just filmed a couple of videos, as I already mentioned. I'm sorry. I apologize. Again, feeling a bit rusty getting back into making videos at the moment. This is the most recent film I watched, and I absolutely loved it. So this is Spy Number 10 in the Eureka Masters of Cinema collection. And it's one that's it's one of the ones in the collection where I've kind of avoided it for years because it's a 3-hour movie. And I kind of got the gist of what the film was. And I thought, I'm probably going to enjoy this with the right moment. But it's not one I can just pick up and watch straight away. Like and I'm going to need to like be in the mood for it. And the other day before work, I had a few hours and I just thought, let's just do it. Because this is like, I want to eventually, I will eventually watch all of the films in the Eureka MOC collection. And if you start from the beginning, Spy Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I've seen it, and then it stops at a point, and then begins the ones I haven't seen. And this was the next one in line, if we're going chronologically through the spine numbers. And I kind of like the idea of kind of just going chronologically through the spines and just kind of just knocking them off like dominoes, almost like ding, 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 ding. And this is the one that's been there for years now, I think, at number 10. And I just thought, fuck it, let's just go for it. Let's just dive in. And God, what a film. What a film. It's another one of those moments where it just justifies the collection so much. Because I expected to find things in this that were impressive, but maybe not enjoy it too much overall, especially with the running time. But this is a phenomenal film by Shoei Imamura, Profound Desires of the Gods. So this is just packed to the gills with incest, if that's your kind of thing. It's set in the 60s, made in the 60s. I need to listen to the commentary by Tony Raines. He did commentary for like an hour of the film, not the whole thing. But it says on the back that it was an 18-month super production. So I'm intrigued a little more about the behind the scenes of this, but it's set in 1960s, made in 1968. And it's this real contrast between a different way of living that was kind of, the way people lived and still do live in certain areas of the world for a very long time, and how this island in Okinawa, fictional island, but it's set in Okinawa, the kind of the encroaching fingers of modernization and this company who are trying to build a well there and kind of get kind of tourism coming in and stuff, and it's that clash between the people who lived there and hold so much stock in the gods that look over the island and all of their ways and stuff. And the island and its origins are steeped in kind of this mythology of a red rock that was thrown into the ocean, and the island rose out, and a brother and sister started the community. So it's kind of, it has this incestuous origin. And we focus on this family, the name of which is probably going to be on the back, the Futori family, the interbred, disgraced and superstitious Futori family. I love this plotline where the son of the family, I guess the middle, because there's kind of three generations, the grandfather, his son, his sister, and then there's two younger ones, so kind of the grandchildren to the kind of head of the family. But the son, the middle character, he's kind of this kind of very slovenly kind of character, and just very wild and stuff, but he's kept in chains. And he just is digging this pit outside the house, and very slowly across the film it stretches out why he's doing this. And you learn that he's been digging this hole outside their house in chains for 20 years because there was a monsoon or kind of a tidal wave, I think it was, and it blew this big red boulder. I don't think it looks particularly red in the film. This big boulder, they call it this big red boulder, and it kind of flattened the field or whatever. And so they're digging a hole to put the rock in the hole and then plant a paddy field. And so it's his punishment because of something that he did before. He's been digging this hole for 2 decades and stuff, and he's been disgraced. And there's all these different there's lots of different relationships going on with the inhabitants of the island. And I loved how it all unfolded. And there's something that Imamura is clearly interested in, having seen this and his remake of The Ballad of Narayama, where he really looks at kind of I don't want to say feral. There are feral elements to some of at least one of the characters, in particular the young daughter who's on the front of the granddaughter. But the primitive kind of animalistic side of humanity, I suppose, and how that clashes with the modern view of living, or the modern way of living. One of the guys who comes in, he's part of this company in Tokyo who's kind of, they want to get stuff going on the island and tourism and building this plant and everything. And he, obviously just is a 1960s Tokyo businessman. And they send, one of the women to go over and seduce him, and the woman is just clawing all over him like an animal. And he's like, no, just get off me. And it's showing this clash of just completely different ways of living. But it also doesn't make it seem like the way the women are treated is necessarily right either. And I could do a whole video on this, but it's a 3-hour movie. What can I say? But there's some really interesting stuff about how the women are treated and their place and everything, and there's some haunting imagery in some of it. There's some beautiful imagery in others. Beautifully shot film. There's great performances, and the story just there's lots going on, but it was never too much, and I was always engaged in what was happening next. I thought it was fantastic. Profound Desires of the Gods. What a film. What a fucking film. And to go now for something completely different, we go to the premium collection, and a film from 1987. We have The Hidden. I heard that Kyle MacLachlan was in this, and I'm like, I'm in. I love the guy. I think he's awesome. Big fan of Twin Peaks, and I've always just gravitated towards him in stuff that I've seen him in. He just seems like a nice guy, and interviews and just his social media presence have proved that to be, I think, correct. He's just a national, worldwide treasure as far as I'm concerned, Kyle MacLachlan. And he plays in this, I don't want to say who he plays in this film. Well, yeah, I guess I can. And it was really funny because this was like a year or two before they shot the pilot for Twin Peaks, 1987. The film opens with this guy going on a rampage in Los Angeles. And there's a big shootout and a big incident, and fire's involved. He gets burnt and everything. They send him to the hospital. And so the police are kind of going in to see what's going on. And then Kyle MacLachlan turns up and he's like, I'm with the FBI. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's Cooper, but his character is different. And I'm pretty sure he's with the FBI. But he comes in to help out on this particular case because these killings start happening throughout Los Angeles. And so he's tagging along. And the guy who's kind of the regular kind of police detective in charge of this sort of stuff is not taking too kindly to this, to Carl MacLachlan's character. So it becomes this kind of forced, uncooperative buddy movie, which, as you can expect, their relationship begins to form a little bit closer as the film progresses. But it's I loved it. It had a cool 80s vibe to it. It is a sci-fi film, and I thought that was really fun. There was a couple of really good practical effects in there as well, and I just thought it was a blast. It was just when the film opens with a guy, and I believe it's the guy who plays Hank in Twin Peaks, just gets in this sports car and he's just bombing through LA and just starts mowing people down. It's like Grand Theft Auto in live action, and you're thinking, where is it? And he's bobbing his head to kind of to heavy metal music, and it's just, there's a real sense of humor to the film as well. But I thought that it was super fun. I really enjoyed The Hidden. Another Eureka Masters of Cinema release by number 231. This is more of a recent one. This is a noir film from 1949 starring Burt Lancaster, Criss Cross. I really liked it. I'd have to refresh myself on the plot of this one. So Burt Lancaster plays Steve Thompson. He's an armored car driver with fatal attraction to his ex-wife. Right, yeah, she's remarried to another kind of local gangster. And so it's about like this guy who, I think he was away for a while. He comes back and goes to his old haunts and stuff. I think there's a bit of time play in the film. It begins, that's right. It begins with like an incident, and then we go back and see more of the background of it, and then we kind of catch up to real time again and understand where the pieces fit. It's a really, really good film. I enjoyed this quite a bit, and there was a really impressive rear projection scene in this where you see the armored car in this kind of set, and it kind of goes out of the doorway to outside, and then the camera pans up, and there's this big window, this arched window, and beyond it is the screen projected, and you see the car driving up. Really clever use of rear screen projection. And I forget the guy's name. I don't think I even really knew it to begin with, but the guy who plays Alfred in the 1960s Batman show, English actor I think he is, he plays one of the kind of crime bosses in this film. I thought, it's Alfred from the 60s Batman. Burt Lancaster, I think it's my first time really seeing him in action, so to speak. I thought he had a great screen presence. I really enjoyed the story of this. This was a really good noir film. I enjoyed it from start to finish. Didn't outstay its welcome. 88 minutes long. Really, really good. And there's something else about it. Just seeing some of LA, I think. This actually kind of was part of... I should put this aside. I had an LA crime kick, which I really enjoyed. And this is something I should talk about, is that in doing this and trying to watch a film every day, I've really enjoyed kind of following these tangents. The only downside is I can't follow them as much as I want to. And I'll talk about some of them as we get through here, because there's a few more that kind of link together. But I can't remember which one came first. I think it was Thief. So we'll get to Thief. But Thief was one where I watched it. I thought, man, I want to see more like crime movies set in LA. So I went to my letterboxd and just filtered crime movies and looked at the ones that were set in Los Angeles. So this was one of them. And this was part of my kind of LA crime kick that I went through. And I really enjoyed watching some of those films. There's still a few more I haven't watched yet. But I really enjoyed this. This was a really good film, Criss Cross. I feel like there's something else I wanted to talk about this, but it's kind of eluded me, I suppose. But there's some really good stuff in this. A really, really, really good film. Next is another Eureka Masters of Cinema release. Let's see if I can get the case out of this one, because it's notoriously difficult to get this thing out of the slip box. All right, here we go. Oh, not that it mattered, because the artwork is the same, so I'll just put it back in. That was really a waste of time that I'll leave in for free. So this is directed by John Huston, and I never know whether it's John like Huston or Houston or Houston. I don't know how you pronounce it properly. He's the father of Angelica Houston. It's Houston, isn't it? So this stars two towering icons of classic Hollywood, Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn in The African Queen. So me and Connor recently watched Jungle Cruise with Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Emily Blunt. Good film. I enjoyed it. It was a breezy good time. Overly reliant on CGI, I thought, but I enjoyed it, and I know that this was one of the inspirations of that. So I thought let's check this out. It's about time. What a film! I loved this. There'll be an individual video on this at some point, because it's in the book, 1,000 more movies you must see before you die, and spoilers, I would agree on this one. So we have Humphrey Bogart, who's this boat driver, and Katharine Hepburn, who is working and living in Africa, and there's an incident in which the village that she's working and living at gets kind of destroyed, and so her chance to kind of get out is with this boat driver who comes around every now and then with supplies and things, played by Humphrey Bogart. And she is this prim, proper, woman, and he is this rough, kind of, greasy, sweaty kind of. I think he has a Brooklyn accent maybe, or he's kind of got the New York thing going on. And I think she's playing British, Katharine Hepburn. But it's that kind of opposites attract storyline. What I loved about this one, though, is that they don't really waste too much time. They don't drag the whole movie out where they eventually realize they like each other. It's pretty early on that they kind of get it on, sort of thing, and it felt really natural and sweet, and I loved their relationship. And it was, they had a couple of rows and stuff, and there was some sparks flying, but it was mostly just really nice. I really loved their chemistry. I thought Bogart was fantastic. Hepburn was great. The only thing about Hepburn, I don't know what it was, but she seemed ill in the movie. She was skeletal, so thin. Her face is the cheekbones seem to be bursting through the skin. So she just looked ill almost in the film. But yeah, I thought it was fun. I could talk about this more, I suppose. And I did watch the hour-long making-of documentary, which is fantastic, and gave a lot of great background on the making of the film and some of the things that they did. There's some early blue screen footage in this, blue screen effects, I should say, when they're going down the rapids and things. And but a lot of it, and they kind of cheated some of it, which is really interesting to see how they did it. But also, they went to Africa, which was, fairly expensive, and there's a whole, it was a difficult film to make, but it produced a classic, I think. I'm going to leave a couple of these till the end, because it's the film I'm the most passionate about, I think. But there's still quite a few. This one I've already talked about. That can go on the floor. Forget about that. And I kind of mentioned this one as well, but I wanted to give this credit. This was film number 1 on the Film Everyday streak project thing. Millennium Actress, Satoshi Kon. Phenomenal film about this. I just noticed I'm leaning a lot while I'm doing this, because I'm trying to readjust this new. I might do a new setup in terms of the angle. I'm just still trying to play around with this room a little bit. So this is a fantastic film about this guy who was a big fan of this Japanese actress. It's an animated film, and he secures an interview with her. She's long since left the limelight, so he goes along with his cameraman to interview her about her career. And as he sits down to set the camera up and they begin talking, and she tells the story of her life and career as an actress, we then see that backstory unfold. But we're seeing scenes from her life with the interviewer and the cameraman inside the memories, and Satoshi Kon is playing with time and memory and what is real and what isn't. And there's just some there's I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but there's a certain theme that it follows, the whole central thrust of kind of her story, I think. Whatever you would call that, if you've seen the film, it portrays that feeling, that state of mind so perfectly. And that by the end, with that final line, I just thought, man, that was great. It's just so creative, so enjoyable, gripping from minute to minute. An absolutely phenomenal film from the genius Satoshi Kon, who died far too young and left us with just a casual handful of masterpieces. So, stretch my leg, because I've been sitting in this position for quite a while. I have talked about this in an update, but not the actual film itself. So this is the Film Stories podcast release, partnered with Plumeria Pictures, of the 90s film Speakers. Speakers? I think I just said speakers, didn't I? Sneakers. So absolutely stacked cast with Robert Redford, Dan Aykroyd, Ben Kingsley, River Phoenix, Sidney Poitier. Phenomenal cast, and this is a fun movie about these group of hackers who are hired by kind of governments and maybe not governments, but institutions, banks, to break into their systems and show them where all their flaws are. And these guys have been put together, and they have various nefarious backgrounds and stuff. And then it all comes to a head when there's this big job they've been kind of caught out and they've been forced into doing this big job, which is a lot more serious than anything they've done before. But there's a real personal twist to it as far as Robert Redford's character is concerned, and the person they're going for is an old friend of his, which is set up at the beginning of the movie. And the opening scene of the film features the clock house from Back to the Future, as do many other films. But I loved this. This was super fun. It's not a great film, it's not like, oh wow, that was fantastic, but it was just so enjoyable. Fun, bouncy, really enjoyable, great cast. You do see actors like River Phoenix in this, and he's kind of a bit of a throwaway character. There's not much meat on it, and you think, wow, he's such a great actor. But this isn't a film that's calling for fantastic performances. It's a film that's just calling for fun, and it exceeded on that in every regard as far as I'm concerned. An Arrow Video disc. Next, I was just intrigued by this. I recently watched last year, I think was it 3 seasons so far of Killing Eve. A phenomenal show. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. I know everyone talks about it, so it might be like, yeah, we knew 3 years ago. But the first season of Killing Eve is one of the best examples, I don't know whether you call it editing or pacing, that I've ever seen in visual storytelling. Every episode of that first season of Killing Eve is about 40 minutes long, and all of them feel like an hour in the best possible way. There's so much story crammed into every single episode. I'm just in awe of the pacing of that show. So in watching that, I grew to admire even more as an actress Sandra Oh, and she stars in this film with Anne Heche, and it is Catfight. So the story of this, as far as I read it and was kind of intrigued by the premise, is Anne Heche and Sandra Oh were in college together, and as adults they see each other for the first time since then, and all that old kind of spite and venom and vitriol just boils over, and they fight. It's a cat fight. They fight, and they fight throughout the movie. I thought that sounds kind of fun. This is a fucked up movie. This is so dark. I don't know if I even want to go into spoiling it or anything, but like horrific things happen in this film, and it's kind of played for laughs. And I do appreciate the dark humor of it, because sometimes that stuff catches you off guard. But if you boil down the actual things that happen to the women in this film, you think that is devastating. If this was a real story, it would just rip your fucking heart out. And the cover of this is like a comic book, and it is almost like this kind of comic book, not fantasy, but I don't feel like this is a film that's really trying to tell you a deep, meaningful story. It's kind of an entertaining, and there is some satire in there. There's some interesting political satire, maybe a bit heavy-handed, but I did like where the director was going with it. But you essentially get these 3 fights between the two of them. In 3 different times, not like throughout their lives. Well, kind of, but it's like they have this fight, and then a year later they come back in. It's kind of this 3-round. It's the rule of threes, and I've had a great time with it. I mean, it's twisted, it's funny, and brutal, and not for everyone for sure. But I really enjoyed it, and would definitely check it out again. There's just some really funny bits. What I liked about it is that at the beginning, you like Anne Heche, she's a nice character. Sandra Oh turns up, and she's just this bitch. Yeah, just punch her in the face. She's such a cunt. And then halfway through the film, you're like, wait, is Anne Heche the cunt? Like, wait, I'm sympathizing with her now. And then you're just like, wait, no. Oh, and it's almost like, it's a weird comparison. It's almost like if The Last of Us Part 2 was a comedy and focused on Ellie versus Abby. Honestly, if this was called, Ellie versus Abby, and just played it for laughs, that's kind of what you would have. So yeah, if you found The Last of Us Part 2 too heavy, but like the idea of 2 women destroying their lives and bludgeoning each other, you might enjoy Catfight. This one was an absolute godsend in terms of tiding me over on nights where I just didn't have enough time. The Halas and Batchelor short films collection from Network. So not all of these are included on Letterboxd. Not all of them are have the page up. So I think I've gone through all of the ones that are on Letterboxd, and I'll definitely go back and mop up the rest I haven't seen. But I watched most of the shorts on this, and it's such a wide variety. So this was a studio in the UK, Halas and Batchelor. I think it was John Halas and his wife Joy Batchelor. Yeah. So I believe they were they were partners, and they worked in animation together. And let me just open this up. You get like a booklet that kind of runs down all of the films, and I'll just kind of run through some of my thoughts here. I mean, we're going long on this one anyway. So open up the booklet here. The Magic Canvas. There's two versions of this: the 1948 version and the 1980 like reimagining with different music. And this is like a really abstract. I really enjoyed the Magic Canvas. It reminded me a bit of like a sequence of Fantasia or something. And what I loved about this set was that so many different styles of animation. There's like stop motion stuff. There's like traditional 2D animation stuff that looks like it's from like the 60s. Well, it is from the 60s, but it has that 60s style. And there's even things that have a different style that I haven't even seen yet that's in the menu when you load up the disc. The Owl and the Pussycat from 1952. This is felt like a children's storybook come to life. The Figurehead was this very strange stop motion animation film from 1953. So it's a mixture of 3D stop motion animation with a technique of shooting through colored filters. And again, from 1953. It was a good one. Didn't love that one so much, but it was interesting. The History of Cinema is a really funny, interesting film from 1957, which kind of looks at TV as the downfall of cinema. And it shows you like crowds at the cinemas like depleting because, well, television is now, cinema's dead. And you're getting the same fucking thing 50, 60 years later because, well, streaming, cinema's dead. And it's like, it ain't going anywhere. Cinema ain't dead. It's just funny to see they were worrying about that in the 50s. I haven't seen those two. Hamilton the Musical Elephant. That was an okay one from the 60s. Automania 2000. This was really fucking good. This imagines, this is from 1963, so it's imagining the year 2000 as this far futuristic place. And obviously it's not like this is what we think will happen, but it's this kind of satirical kind of thing. And it won multiple awards, as it says here in the booklet. So this is like, again, it's about technological overkill, as it says in the booklet. This is a world in which people live in their cars, and just like society is just cars, all stacked on top of each other. Just this intricate system, just pumping out cars, and they've now been custom built to have people, living in them, their living quarters and everything, and just it keeps piling up and piling up. And it was really kind of a darkly funny little film. I like that one a lot. Flow Diagram felt like an educational film. Didn't enjoy it. That's the weird one, that one. The Question. A man sets out to find the meaning of life. That was a pretty funny one, actually. It was kind of a funny twist to that one. Children and Cars from 1971. This one reminded me of the Up series, the 7 Up series, because you have a mixture of live action footage of children drawing cars and kind of giving their like the weird concepts and stuff. This is a really fun little short film. Autobahn. So Autobahn, 1979, this is a kind of a music video, they call it a visual interpretation of the Kraftwerk song Autobahn. This is kind of a hypnotic kind of, again, you got that electronic kind of soundscape and stuff and some of the weird visuals that they came up with for the film. I really enjoyed it. Dilemma from 1981. This is one of the first computer animated films to tell a story. I've actually forgotten. Oh no, I remember now. Yeah, it was a bit of a weird one actually. You think computer animation and you visualize Pixar, but it's kind of like it's manipulating things in kind of a in a computer way. I don't know. This is not really a good way of describing it. It didn't stand out very much, obviously, because I don't remember too much about it. But it's slowly filtering back into my brain. It was more of like a weird visuals, and it felt like it was stretching the muscles of what you could do with computer animation at that time in the early 1980s. But yeah, I love just seeing the variety. Yeah, there's some really good ones, some okay ones, and for me, I paid like £4 for that many years ago. That's well worth it. It's a proper film history, all this stuff, and in high definition, it's really fun to see these kinds of things. This one I watched a couple of nights ago. I've been wanting to see this ever since I heard about it, purely based on the title. Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain. I don't know if it's Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain or Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain. It's stylized as that in some places, but there's all sorts of different different not interpretations, but different translations of the actual title of the movie. This was 1983, directed by Choi Hark, and you have Yoon Biao. I'm just going to say that and hope for the best. Sammo Hung, and the whole cast was great. I could do a whole video on this. This was absolute bedlam. Mayhem from start to finish. It just doesn't let up. It's this fantasy epic that just throws everything at the wall, scrapes it all off, puts it in a blender, sprays it against the wall again, lets it freeze, scrapes all that stuff off again, and then throws all the frozen shards and then kind of the solid bits up into the air, and then just swishes the camera through all the bits and just sees what comes on screen. It's ridiculous. You can see the wires everywhere. I almost wish that you couldn't see some of the more obvious things. There's sped up photography. There's miniatures. There's these lighting effects. These incredible sets. There's it's an all-out assault on the senses. There's this early kind of blue screen stuff. I mean, I talked about the African Queen having early blue screen stuff in the 50s, but these characters are flying around the screen, shooting composited kind of rotoscoped effects at each other. And that's maybe where my only complaint is that it loses some of the charm, although there is even a charm to the bad special effect in terms of the computer stuff. But to me, the charm of the film is like the sets and the practical stuff and all that kind of. And there's some kind of cheap hokey stuff that they kind of threw in there, but this was so much fun. This was, oh my god, loved it, absolutely loved it. So this one's a really nice. I feel like going through the extras like this is a Blu-ray update, but I realized at some point in the past I've already done this and talked about the extras. I started watching Zoo Time Warrior, which is an export version of the film that has like a new sequence with Yoon Biao's character. He's in present day and he goes to a museum and sees a mural with all these characters. It was like probably like a 20-minute additional thing, but then they cut out a lot of the other stuff from the main version of the film to kind of tie in this guy who travels back to the past or sees into the past or something. I don't think it's in high definition either, but I started watching it. It was kind of an interesting oddity. I'm glad they included it. Okay, he's transported Wizard of Oz style back to 10th century China. So yeah, and I think that there's like an hour-long plus interview with Choi Hark that was filmed especially for this release. So stacked with extras, 2K restoration. Didn't look the greatest, I have to say, but that's a lot of that is to do with the condition of the actual existing elements. I can tell because a lot of it is sort of hazier shots when you know that they've run it through some kind of what's the term? The term has eluded me. Not compositing, but optical. They run it through optical effects, so you lose some of that generation of quality there, and then other shots look crisper when they don't have all that stuff processed over it. So I love Zoo Warriors from the Magic. It just, the title sounded like bonkers, and the film delivered on that times 10. And I love the guy who played, I forget the character's name, but he was kind of the master to Yoon Biao's character. So I just, yeah. Anyway, I think we now have just 2 more little phases of stuff. Okay, there's one other thing. There's still quite a few Blu-rays left. Hopefully you enjoy this style of video, me just waxing lyrical about all these films. This is a BFI release of The Firm, starring Gary Oldman. This is an Alan Clark film, and I now, having watched this, I'm kicking myself that I didn't find a way to buy that big Alan Clark box set because, man, I would love to have that and see more Alan Clark stuff. So this is from 1989 and is a kind of a football hooligan movie. So Gary Oldman plays this guy who kind of, you could say he's masquerading as kind of a respectable, citizen of London, but he's also a football hooligan, and actively, participates in meeting up with other gangs and fighting them and getting brutal. And it's this weird kind of thing where all of them they kind of have this air of middle class English to them, but they also kind of again meet guys in basement car parks with knives and just try and just slash each other, and it's just like mental, like, and it's one of those films I don't enjoy very much because I hate that kind of culture, the football culture and everything, and it just seems so fucking pointless, but it is one of those dark sides to me of the human psyche. and football gangs and kind of that just the gang mentality and everything, and just seeing Gary Oldman trying to live a normal life with his partner and his young son, all the while doing all this crazy stuff. And it's not a very long film; it's like an hour and 10 minutes, I think. And there's also a director's cut version, which has inserts that were cut out for the broadcast on television, so you get to see a little bit more of the sexual stuff, but a lot more of the violence and kind of closer shots and details of some of the gore on some of the people who get attacked in the film. Not like crazy amounts, but certainly enough that you probably wouldn't see on TV in 1989. So you get the broadcast version that looks great in high definition, but the director's cut has those little moments put back in from a work print, I think it was. Yeah, it can reconstructed from Alan Clark's personal work print, and they look a lot rougher than the rest of the. But it's nice that they included it. I wouldn't watch it again, I don't think, but I really, really was engaged by it, and it was, it made me feel. There's a scene in this, right, where, and it really shows you that you should always be paying attention to films when you watch them, because you might miss something really important in a very short frame of time. So I was eating Criss while I was watching this. Gary Oldman's on the phone to one of his kind of gang rivals. He's giving it all this, like, yeah, I'm going to fucking kill you and all that. And his son is there in front of him. And then suddenly he puts the phone down and grabs his son. And he's like, no, no, no. He starts screaming and he's like calling for his wife. He's like, get down here now. Call an ambulance. And she's freaking out. The kid's freaking out. And I thought initially, oh, he's just trying to get his wife out of the house. So he's pretending that his son swallowed something or something. What a piece of shit. But then I thought, hang on. I might have misread that. So I rewound the scene. Gary Oldman's on the phone. His son is right in front of him, but he's so into this kind of threat that he's given this guy on the phone that we have a quick shot of his like 1-year-old son holding his Stanley knife. And it's there as this threat to the audience, and you knowing that he is right in front of him, but he's not seeing it. It's the hubris of this of him being so involved in this horrible lifestyle. And I even like, and Leslie Manville plays his wife, and she's really good in the film. And they have this kind of bust up where she doesn't want him to continue doing this. She's tolerated it for a while, clearly, and he's just like, I need the buzz, And but anyway, so you have that shot of the kid with the knife, and then the next shot, he's put the knife in his mouth, he's rubbing it in, and his blood coming out. I missed that just by eating some crisps. They are very quick shots, and I felt so bad for the young kid who played him, because when Gary Oldman picks him up and starts screaming, the kid starts really getting upset. And there's no acting involved there. And it kind of takes me out of the film sometimes when I see a young actor who's clearly crying for real and has been manipulated in that way. But I understand that they needed to do it for the scene. I'm sure the kid was showered with affection afterwards and given sweets and things. But, it's a young kid, one and a half or something, and it was a bit distressing to see him in distress, in my opinion. But there's some sobering stuff in this, and just really memorable. Gary Oldman was great. There's lots of like witticisms where they're just like bantering back and forth, and even though I kind of hate that kind of culture, it was kind of enjoyable to see the one-upmanship of the kind of verbal barbs they're throwing back and forth to each other. And there's this one sequence where he goes back to his dad's house, and his dad has clearly fostered this in him, and I really like that because they don't really go into it, but you see by the fact that Gary Oldman's dad is supportive. Clearly, and is enabling this gang mentality stuff to go forward. You then realize his dad was obviously involved in this, and that's why he does it. But they were all gathered, him and his crew, in his dad's living room with all their weapons. And they take a Polaroid with like the baseball bat and the hammer, and they're like, fucking come on! And it's just like, God, this is like a horror movie, and it has a pretty stark ending. But there you go. What are you going to do? So the film, I really enjoyed that. Now, my LA crime kick, as I was saying. Are we going to get into this in more? I feel like it's approaching an hour now in the video, and I should wind things up. But if I've gone this long, right? Let's see where it takes us. So, the LA crime kick started with Thief. And actually, I'm gonna stop the recording just because I'm getting a bit antsy about losing the audio. I've been going for an hour now, so we'll do that and we'll reconvene, even though it'll be instantaneous for you. But I couldn't be bothered trying to edit that, so I'm just being upfront. Give me a second, we'll get back to this. Okay, let me get a sip of water. Sip of water for the working man. Let's get on with this. Bring this thing home. LA crime kick. Started with Thief. Now, my inspiration for, I think I went and bought this when I wanted to watch it. Um, I might have already talked about this in a Blu-ray update, I think. So I'm kind of retreading old ground, but I listened to a podcast with Quentin Tarantino talking about all kinds of movies, and he said that I don't think anyone has delivered Michael Mann dialogue quite as well as Robert Prosky in Thief. And I've always associated Robert Prosky with the kind old projectionist in Last Action Hero, Nick. So it was with great interest that I thought, ooh, Robert Prosky in a crime movie, like assumably, presumably, I'm assuming, playing a more edgier role than kind old Nick from Last Action Hero. This is James Caan, who is a thief, if you wouldn't believe it. I know the title's a bit cryptic, and it's a great cast. James Belushi, Robert Prosky, Dennis Farina, who I almost thought Dennis Farina would be in it even more. He seems that he would fit an LA crime movie like a glove, as he would go on to do in the future as well. And this has a Tangerine Dream score, which is fantastic. Really, I love that kind of electronic stuff. And Willie Nelson. What the fuck? Like, Willie Nelson has one scene in this film, and he almost steals the whole fucking show. It's this weird kind of like, like leering kind of like character. Like I mean, I'm not too familiar with Willie Nelson, I have to say. Looking at him, I could say, yeah, I guess that's Willie Nelson, but he didn't look like himself in some respects. But he just I just think of the meme from Zemo in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. In reference to Willie Nelson's performance in Thief, it's a masterpiece, complete, comprehensive. Like, I just believed that character completely. There was that little thing of, oh, I guess that's Willie Nelson, then just like, wow. He's behind this screen. It's almost like Hannibal Lecter worthy. And it's not even that overt, but just the way he kind of like is sidling up to the glass. And just, I don't know, he's fucking brilliant. Willie Nelson, what a fucking performance in 2 fucking minutes. And James Caan is very good. I like the kind of the romance he was trying to stoke throughout the film. But he begins working for Robert Prosky's character, and he gets deeper and deeper into this thing that he kind of wants to get out of. It's the classic story. The guy wants to do one more hit and get out, and it's not that simple. It's a pretty, we've seen the story before, but it's really well done. I absolutely love this film. And there's a shootout at the end, and the music is like, wow, it's familiar. It's comfortably numb, or it's comfortably numb inspired. Like that's pretty close. And I went online and I read that Michael Mann, who directed the film, Michael Mann wanted to get comfortably numb for that sequence and couldn't afford it, or they wouldn't let him use it. And so he just got whoever was doing that piece of music to do one that was close enough. And I was tweeting about this, and someone replied saying like, "Oh man, I used to like that film." I'm like, it doesn't matter, it is one of those. I mean, John Williams was cribbing stuff, classical pieces for Star Wars. You take these things, reinvent them, but it was quite overt. And then I suddenly, ding, I remembered that Michael Mann, like only 5 years after this film was made Manhunter and did the same fucking thing. Graham's theme in Manhunter it's comfortably numb. You can almost listen to, and it's an instrumental piece. You can almost listen to it and sing along to the the verses of Comfortably Numb. It's just like, wow, Michael Mann really loved Comfortably Numb, but never got a chance to fucking use it. That one thing that cracked me out. And Robert Prosky was really good in the film, very subdued. But there's this piece at the end where he just turns into this ice cold motherfucker, where you're just like, holy shit. So I really enjoyed it, and it like I said earlier, like it's the same. You've seen this story before, but I liked where it went, and it surprised me. There is this ultimate kind of like setup of like this heist that James Caan has to pull off, and makes me think of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. This is not going to go the way you think. It just didn't go the way I thought it would at all, and I love that because it just was a surprising element of the film. But it's about more than just the heist, obviously, and a really fucking cool film. This initially came out with a second disc, a limited edition version of the theatrical cut. But from what I understand, it's there's not too much. There's just like a new scene added. So, and I really like that scene at the beginning where he's sitting down with the guy fishing. It's kind of a nice little moment. Not essential, but I quite enjoyed it. I love the opening 10 minutes of the film that plays out pretty much with no dialogue, and it's just showing you him at work, and the music and the build up, the editing is all fantastic. This comes from a 4K transfer, which looked fantastic. So this was the beginning of my LA crime kick. I went and watched a couple more in that period, and then I went and watched stuff like Criss Cross. A couple that I kind of had in mind. There was at least LA Confidential was one of them. There was a couple of others as well, but the other three that I checked out were, we'll kind of go in order here when I watched them. Dark Blue, starring Kurt Russell. So this is made in 2002 and is set in the early 90s, I believe, with the literal build up to and commencing of the Rodney King riot. I think it was Rodney King. So it's spring 1992. And Kurt Russell plays this police officer who's a prick. He's a kind of racist, kind of bigoted prick, basically. And he's one of my favorite actors, and it was a little bit difficult to see him in that situation, but it made for a very interesting story. And he wasn't irredeemable either, but like he had those kind of traits to him. And there's a younger police officer who's trying to do the right thing, but he's kind of being led astray. And I liked how they're all interwove with each other. Blendon, I'll leave them for free. Brendan Gleeson plays kind of a higher up in the LAPD who's a real racist piece of shit, even more so than Kurt Russell. And you get to see how these people are influencing each other and protecting each other in some cases too. Ving Rhames is in this film. It's a very good cast. I feel like they could have done more with the Rodney King riots element of it. It felt a bit thrown in towards the end. And there is an ending which is like a big speech, which didn't quite fit the tone of the rest of the movie. But I still really liked this film. I thought Kurt Russell was phenomenal. He gave a great performance. I mean, you can always count him to be at least very good, but he was great in this film. And I was a little bit disappointed in Kurt Russell in this, in the extras on this. I don't have time to watch all of these things, but there's a nice kind of set of original EPK interviews. So when the actors kind of promote, and the director and so on promote these films, they sit down, and do kind of the not round robin, but they do this kind of rotating, they sit in a chair and they answer all these same questions that the interviewers ask and stuff. And so there's there's one kind of news outlet or film journalism outlets their answers that they got, because obviously if you were to go to like an EPK of a film being promoted and got all the footage, you'd have like 10 hours worth of stuff probably, but they just get one round of persons ask. It doesn't really specify who. I don't know why I'm going into this fucking detail. So it's just you get the EPK interviews, and Kurt Russell's there. He's being interviewed about the film, and they're talking about what goes on and stuff, and the interviewer is trying to get stuff out of Kurt in terms of like the film. And Kurt's just like kind of like, well, we answer it in the hour and 50 minutes of the movie, and he's just like, well, what about this? And he's like, well, it is something that's part of the hour and 50 minutes of the film. And I just feel like the questions aren't gelling with the guy who wants to answer them. But then what disappointed me was they were talking about, essentially, they don't think they really said it outright, but they were talking about police brutality, which is a big theme of Dark Blue. Which is kind of where the title plays into it, I guess, and I quite like that. But Kurt Russell was essentially advocating for police brutality in this, and he was saying that, they say that, that it needs to be curbed and everything, but, when that stuff is suppressed, you see the crime rate go up, and then, when we ramp it up again and the police are more physical with criminals, then the crime rate goes down. People are happy, but then, maybe you need some of that. And I was like, I don't think that's the right answer, Kurt. Like, I respect everyone's opinion and stuff, but I think that there's a way to go about it, and and I certainly am all for physical force being enforced in many situations, but and that may be more what he's saying, I suppose. But I was, and it's one of those things where not don't meet your heroes or anything, but sometimes don't put too much stock in how cool someone is who you admire in the entertainment industry, because you don't really know them, And I think I would imagine Kurt Russell's a cool guy, but it was a bit of an off-color, not comment, but suggestion of where his kind of opinions and values lied in terms of that stuff. But at the same time, it wasn't like I would condemn him completely, but I was a bit shocked by his answer there, where he was kind of saying that, well, maybe we do need the police to kind of be a bit rougher with the criminals. For me personally, I would say, and I don't want to go into this now, but fuck it, the video's been this long. I think that it is necessary, but I think that there are so many ways to do it, and you can train people to do it in ways that isn't going to fuck these people up for life or kill them. And that's the Rodney King. It's well, not that that's the same situation as say a George Floyd, but they are similar in some respects. I'm just saying that we're talking about varying degrees of what happened. And really intriguing was what he said in the interview. You're saying that, the Rodney King riots, he said that when it comes to this issue, there seems to be a boiling point where it just all comes to a head, and it becomes something happens and it just explodes into the public consciousness, and it becomes a real moment. And he said that, the Rodney King riots were 10 years ago. And he said about every 30 years this seems to happen, and it's kind of a cycle. And by that metric, this would all come to a head again in 2020 or so, which it did with the George Floyd stuff. So that was a real prescient comment from Kurt Russell. But there you go, Dark Blue. I really enjoyed that film quite a bit, and I think I'm overplaying this. Like, I was disappointed in Kurt, but just I was more surprised than anything. Like, it's a shame that he's like, yeah, fuck him, let's just beat him up. So moving forward. Another Kurt Russell film, but I'll leave that to go in chronological order of my LA crime kick for now, because this one was like the next one on the list, which felt like it would be similar in vein to Thief, in terms of the setting, the decade, the genre, and also the score. So from what I understand, this has another kind of electronic, kind of like poppy kind of score. And I ended up listening to this one, and I'm still listening to the score for this one. More than the Tangerine Dream one from Thief. And this one is William Friedkin's To Live and Die in LA, soundtrack by Wang Chung, and what a fucking film. I almost think that, like, I hate to compare the two, but Thief and this one go almost hand in hand for me, because they released within like 4 or 5 years of each other. Similar kind of approach to the score, kind of poppy electronic stuff almost, and then like the dark underbelly of kind of the nefarious criminals and things like that, and just the style of it, I suppose, as well. But I would say Thief is probably a better film than this, maybe, but I enjoyed this one more. Right from the beginning, when that theme song kicks in, and it, first like 5-10 minutes, I was just like, whoa there, Friedkin, hang on. Calm down a sec. He's throwing these insert shots in like this nobody's business. Like that opening credit sequence. I think I tweeted it at the time. William Friedkin has just got no visual chill so far, and I'm here for it. Like the title comes up, and then it's just a woman's face, and then we just cut back to a train yard. I was like, what is going on? Later on, you see who that woman is, and it kind of, I'm like, oh, okay, so it wasn't just a completely random shot of a woman looking into the camera, but there's just all this sort of stuff going on, and the pacing of it is great. The choice of angle, cinematography, obviously, but the editing was phenomenal, and Willem Dafoe plays the kind of the villain of the film, and there's this striking sequence at the beginning when he's got all these paintings that he's done, and he puts one up on the wall and he lights it on fire, and he's just looking at it, and this is the way it's framed, it's just like this great, and then you just cut to a plane flying overhead, and it's just like, I don't know, there's something really dynamic about this way. There was the way images were placed next to each other, and how long those images were on screen before they cut to the next. Something I always kind of agonize over is like, how long do you linger on a shot? And this is just me on YouTube videos or all kind of editing montages maybe, but I love the science and the art of how long do you hold a shot for, and there's just moments in this film where the editing is just so brilliant. I think I love the way that some of that played out, even towards the end, the ending itself, in fact. And you have William Peterson, I believe, is the actor's name, who plays the kind of the lead cop, and he is obsessed with revenge. His partner gets taken down at the beginning of the film, and so Peterson is on just like and he has a partner, a new partner who comes in to help him. And the new partner is kind of reticent to kind of bend or break the rules on this revenge mission. It's like, this is becoming too personal. We're not really going through the right channels here. But William Peterson's just like, we got to fucking get this guy. And he's after Dafoe. And it's weird to see a young Willem Dafoe. You know, he's I mean, he has a very distinctive look. But I don't think I've seen him this young in a movie before. But he commands the screen with a weird kind of presence. And the cast was very good. I like the guy who played the partner, because he wasn't an actor I immediately I think I've seen him in a few things, but he was like a sleeper character to me, where he didn't seem as important until nearer the end. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I like how this character has evolved, and where he's fitting into things as we come into the third act. William Peterson was great. I love how, like, on a mission he was. There's a phenomenal chase sequence in this that was just bonkers. Like, you don't get them like this anymore in terms of action movies. And I don't know if you'd even call this an action. It was a thriller, crime thriller. But you don't get action sequences like you get the car chase. And Friedkin, holy shit. I mean, you do a car chase like The French Connection. And it's just like, you should be, in my opinion, you should be like, okay, I can put my stamp on probably the best car chase ever in a movie. Let's do another one. It's like, calm down, dude, you've done it. And he's like, no, I'm going to do it again. It's like, fair play. What a director to go from like The Exorcist, Sorcerer, French Connection and this. I mean, it's just such an interesting, varied filmography of just top fucking quality films. So I super enjoyed this, loved the soundtrack, and and just had a great time with this film. To live and die in LA. I could again wax lyrical, as they say, about that one for a long time. The last one in my LA crime kick was a film I recently showed in an update, bought it quite recently. It was part of the Amazon price drop glitch, and it was like £1, 117 or something. And I was just like, that's a cool title. That's a cool cast. I'm buying that movie. Knew nothing about it, but gleaned that it was set in LA and was kind of a crime movie. Tequila Sunrise. Mel Gibson, Kurt Russell, and Michelle Pfeiffer. And Raul Julia, who I love and was looking forward to seeing. He's not in it as much as I would have liked. And when you first meet him, he's fairly, withdrawn and not withdrawn, subdued, and kind of, not to kind of pigeonhole Raul Julia as this like over the top actor, but he usually plays quite colorful, characters and stuff. But towards the end, he really lets loose, and I was just like in heaven seeing this little outburst from Raul Julia. So Michelle Pfeiffer, she plays this woman who works at this restaurant. Mel Gibson plays this used to be a drug dealer, may still be a drug dealer, kind of mystery guy. And then Kurt Russell plays the kind of straight-laced cop who used to be friends with Mel Gibson. And so he's kind of after drug dealers, and there's kind of a big drug thing going down in LA. And so their friendship is kind of being tested and kind of pulled and stuff. And then in the middle of that, there's a love triangle between the three of them. Michelle Pfeiffer, fucking beautiful in this film, but she also gives a really good performance. Like, I liked how she played off of both of them. I thought she had really good chemistry with both of them. There's a sex scene between her and Mel Gibson that is ridiculous. I just couldn't help but laugh at how indulgent it was, and the way that it was shot was just strange. Kurt Russell was great. I loved how he was really being, tested with his kind of, how he felt about his friend and how he felt about his job. Unfortunate that there's a boat exploding on the front of the Blu-ray. You kind of assume there's going to be a boat blowing up in the film. And so when I saw a boat, I was like, oh, that's kind of like Chekhov's boat. It's going to blow up at some point. So there's a bit towards the end where Mel Gibson is in this argument with Raul Julia about Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Now Mel Gibson is saying, like, look, she's cool, she loves me, she's and you don't know where she's going to end up, but he's like, she loves me, she's not going to say anything about this thing that we both know about. And Raul Julia just really starts to lose his chill, and he's like, no, don't you understand, she'll say anything to you, she'd fuck a snake. And I couldn't handle it. I belly laughed so much. Not only at Raul Julia saying, like, with his big bug eyes, she'd fuck a snake, but like the mental image of that, trying like that. I guess it is physically possible, but just the idea of it is just like, what? Like, I just think, who wrote that line? And like, what happened that day when on when Raul Julia read his lines and was just like, yeah, I can deliver that sufficiently. I don't know. It's just, but yeah, that's a line that will be embedded in my head for the rest of time. It feels like we're at the end, but there's four more fucking films to talk about. But two of them will be Epic Film Challenge 2 videos. So I went on a James Stewart kick. So it's one of those things where, the LA crime stuff was like taking me in different directions. And then one night I was like, I want to watch that James Stewart film. Watch it. I was like, I want to watch another one. I want to give me the hook James Stewart into my veins, please. So I watched that one and that one. And I'm like, God, I'm really digging this kind of like Frank Capra, 1930. Let's watch some more 1930 stuff. But there's just not enough time to kind of go in all different directions. So, I'm watching these Harold Lloyd films. I like to go and watch all the Buster Keaton films again. But I've already seen them, so I need to watch different things I haven't seen before. So I love the excitement of going in different directions. But there's only so many places I can stretch myself. But the film that kicked off the James Stewart kick was Harvey. Now, this might be a bit of a deep cut reference here, but I listened to the podcast Films to Be Buried with Brett Goldstein, who recently won an Emmy for Ted Lasso. Interestingly enough, I love Brett Goldstein, love his podcast. I think Ted Lasso is a great show. I find him to be the weak link, But I think he's a cool guy, so I'm happy for him that he won an Emmy and everything. But he did one of his early episodes with Scroobius Pip, who's a guy who runs the network I think that the podcast is hosted on. And he talked about this film in his episode and how much it helped him, and he would watch it all the time and stuff. So it's always stuck in my memory, from listening to that episode and thinking I should watch that. I love James Stewart. It seems a bit outlandish. James Stewart plays a guy who has an imaginary 6-foot-tall bunny for a friend. His best friend is an imaginary friend. It's this bunny, and he something's off with him obviously, because he's perfectly normal except the fact that he's always looking up at Harvey and like, oh, come on, let's his arm around a shoulder that doesn't exist. And I was thinking, like, is this going to be, like, animated? Is it going to be, like, a guy in a suit? But, spoilers, you never see the bunny. And so it really is just the power of his acting and how he's trying to sell it. But this is a really, really funny film. But it has a real sweetness to it that caught me off guard. It didn't entirely catch me off guard because I'd heard on that podcast that this was a very kind of almost a life-affirming movie in a way. But I was taken aback by where the story went and where the sweetness came from. And there were certain characters who I really loved as the film progressed. And James Stewart, he just had something about him, something special. And it's really captured in this film. And in a way different from any other film that he did. And there's a really great special feature on this. Special introduction to the film by star Jimmy Stewart with photographic montage, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's basically images of the film and an audio recording of James Stewart in his kind of elderly years talking about the film. And he actually played this role on the stage first. So he actually performed this as a play, and then it was then adapted to a film, which happened quite a lot back in those days, especially in like the 30s and stuff. But I think this was 1951, 1950, early 50s at least. It doesn't quite say, 1950. Fact, bang on the middle of the century. So, but he said that it's one of his fondest roles, which felt nice. It's like, so I guess it wasn't, well, not that it wasn't just me, but it felt like a special film. And I'd never really, apart from that podcast episode, I'd never really heard anyone talk about this. And I thought, like, am I just imagining things that this is a really like special film? So it was nice to hear that James Stewart thought highly of it and stuff. But it was. In some ways, he almost plays a variant of the same character, James Stewart. There is this kind of like a moral compass, a kind of a chipper attitude. He plays like some tortured characters in some films, and he's actually really good at playing a villain in some westerns. But this one was a little bit different than that. It was a different slant on that kind of character. The woman who played his mother was phenomenal, so funny. The whole cast is great, and I did not see where that third act was going. Not even that there's really a twist, but just it slows down at one point in the bar, or specifically outside the bar. And I just was like, I love this film. I'm just so happy I'm watching this right now. It's like the magic of cinema where you just feel transported and kind of entertained, and yet it leaves you thinking. It has you thinking while you're watching it. You know, I love this film dearly, and it'll be an all-time favorite in a few years, I think, once I watch it a few more times. And Connie loves James Stewart. See, you always just say Jimmy Stewart, and she's like, no, it's James Stewart. So she kind of got me off it, but she loves James Stewart, and I've tried to get her to watch this a few times, and she's like, yeah, when she hears the plot, you know. So I'm gonna have to force her to do it, and I just think it was one of those films where it was. I mean, it's what, an hour and 44 minutes. It got to like an hour 40, and I was so stressed out about like, how is this gonna end? Like, I want more. Like, give me another 20 minutes of this. Like, and it's one of those films where it ended and I wanted more, but in that beautiful way where it's like it leaves you wanting more, but it doesn't leave you frustrated that there isn't more. If that makes any kind of sense, you should know what I'm talking about. If you're watching this far into the video, you probably are a big film fan. You understand that feeling where, you know, it's like, oh, I wanted more of that, but it was just the right amount. You know, leave them wanting more. You know, in a good way, not like, well, that didn't, you know, that could have done with an extra 5 minutes. No, it's just like, oh, I would have loved an extra 5 minutes of that, but that was great. That kind of thing. Now, the next James Stewart movie is The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1936 and 1934, which doesn't star James Stewart. So no, I was just throwing this in here because I bought this fairly recently, actually, I think, this one. So this stars Peter Lorre and a whole host of other really good actors who I don't know from other films, so I'm not going to mention them. This is an early Alfred Hitchcock film. And this is in the book, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And so I watched it, and I was like, okay, I'll start thinking about the video. And then I checked the book and found out this isn't in the book. But the remake is in the book, which is also filmed by Hitchcock and stars James Stewart. So I had planned to maybe watch the 50s version with James Stewart just to compare to this one. But I thought, well, I haven't got the time for that. I thought, well, fuck, I've got to do it now because it's not in the book. So this ended up being kind of a fruitless watch. But I'm so glad I watched this one first and watched it in general. This is a really good little thriller. I'm lagging at this point. We're like an hour and a half into the filming session, at least, and how long the video is at this point. But really, really enjoyed this. I'll talk about it more in the upcoming Epic Film Challenge 2 video and compare the two films, I suppose. So my Hitchcock box set is over in the corner. So I also then went and watched the James Stewart version, which I feel like there's in both films. Both of them have like their pluses and minuses. I think that the original has a stronger villain character in Peter Lorre. I think that James Stewart is the stronger protagonist, but also Doris Day brings a lot to the table in the remake, and you have the way that they used Que Sera Sera in the remake. I had a lump in my throat by the end. The way that they tied it in, I thought that was really stirring stuff. But yeah, I really enjoyed the story. I think that it could be done better in some respects. I think I'd love to see a modern remake of this with a really good director. Maybe even someone like Denis Villeneuve, who has done a really good kind of, you know, intimate kind of, well, not intimate, but smaller scale kind of thriller with something like Prisoners, like a family thriller where there's a kidnapping is involved in the film. I think with a really good modern cast, you could get a great film out of that. And I don't know whether you would tie that into London again and take it to the Royal Albert Hall for a third time. But anyway, regardless, we're going to end, mercifully, ladies and gentlemen, on one final film, and it would be the one I would say out of all the films I watched for this period, but it might even be the top spot of my 2021 first time watches. This is a film that I felt like I needed to watch out of a duty, that it was something that, as a fan of James Stewart, well, I gotta watch that one. I think he won an Oscar for it, or he was nominated. It's one of his bigger roles, and I thought, wow, it seems like a bit of a dry subject. It's not going to be something I'm going to love very much, but I need to see it at some point. And so I've had the American Digibook for years, and I bought this from the premium collection, forgetting I already had the Digibook. So I'm like, I'm just in a James Stewart mood, and so even if I do get a bit bored with the plot, it's a bit slow. It's a 2-hour movie. It's political. At least it's a James Stewart movie, and I'm in a big James Stewart mood, so that'll carry me through. So the film is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. So in my head, I'm thinking this is, James Stewart plays an up and coming politician. He goes to Washington, enters the Senate perhaps, and has to struggle with political corruption and has to kind of fight the good fight. And it isn't that. And I'm not entirely sure on the origin of his character. What's his character's name? What does it say on the back? It doesn't. He's a small town American senator. It seems like his character's been plucked out of obscurity. Just that guy will be the next senator. So at the beginning of the movie, there's a senator who dies. His place needs to be filled, and like the higher ups in Washington need to kind of decide who's gonna fill this spot, but who's gonna fill the spot in a way that they won't disrupt kind of our shady things that we've got going on, because we really need this stuff to go through unnoticed. And so they picked James Stewart because he's a bit of a, I say a newbie to politics and stuff. I should save this for the review because this is going to get a full length EFC Epic Film Challenge 2 review. But, the way they kind of pluck him out as if he's some sort of simpleton. I'll look into that before I do the proper review. But he comes in and he's blissfully unaware of the corruption that's going on around him. And he becomes kind of friendly with Jean Arthur's character, who's a reporter, and she's the real cynic, and she kind of is a bit sickened by him at first, but she begins to kind of warm to him, and she kind of begins to kind of show him some of the stuff that's going on, and ultimately it all comes to a head with, I want to say it's like the last 45 minutes of the film, maybe the last 35 minutes of the film. They call it a filibuster, I think. James Stewart, he goes into the Senate and he's realized everything that's wrong with what's going on, and he wants to make his stand. And it's this kind of clause where when they're all there in the kind of the Senate room, whatever, I don't know anything about American politics, but they're in the big kind of room, and he has the floor, and he's decided, I'm going to hold the floor until someone does something about this, and we're not leaving here until it's done. And so legally he can hold that position, and he can keep talking to like the people there, the members of the Senate, and then the members of the public who are up in the kind of the balconies and stuff, for as long as he's physically able to keep talking. I think the only rule is he can't stop talking for a while, and he can't. I don't think he can sit down maybe, because he's like, by the end of it, he's just, I mean, he goes for like a day, and it's just this grueling process where he will not give up in the face of what's good and right. And that sounds kind of cringy and kind of, Hallmark movie-esque, but it's done with such like earnestness from James Stewart. And the way that story builds, even though I'm not the biggest of it, I don't love political movies so much, but this was really just this very basic human story of man versus corruption. And there's so many interesting moments of direction. There's from Frank Capra, a sequence where he is kind of fumbling with this woman who he's kind of, he is kind of wowed by. And instead of seeing his face or kind of seeing both of them in like a medium shot of him kind of getting all, flustered, we just focus on his hands holding his hat and kind of dropping it and like knocking things over and then picking the hat back up again, and then just, and it was just a really interesting quirk just to follow his hands with the camera and convey the awkwardness through that kind of perspective. Thomas Mitchell, who plays I think he's another reporter with Jean Arthur, and like what happened with Thomas Mitchell? Honestly, it's like he woke up I don't know if he was married in 1939. It's like he woke up in 1939, January 1st, and said to his wife, "Honey, just forget about our relationship. I'm just going to go and star in as many incredible films this year as humanly possible." I mean, he did Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I've actually forgotten. There's a like ridiculous list of films that Thomas Mitchell did in 1939, and they've now left my mind, which is like a perfect. I felt good about that little analogy I was just spinning out of fucking nowhere there, and I've forgotten the films that he starred in that year. I think it was like Hunchback of Notre Dame, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Only Angels Have Wings. There's another massive movie that he did. I feel like I should look it up. Maybe I will before the end of the video. But Thomas Mitchell, like, he was everywhere in 1939. Stagecoach. He won the Oscar for Stagecoach. And me and Ryan Chataway were laughing. We were joking about it on just texting back and forth. And Ryan said something to the effect of like, yeah, he was just like, He'd turn up one day for Stagecoach blind drunk, and they just be like, film it. And then like he wanders onto the set of like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He's just like, oh, because when we first see his character, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, he's like kind of like lounging on this couch, like hungover maybe from Stagecoach. I'm imagining, film it, yeah. Like all these film studios are just like loaning out Thomas Mitchell and just ferrying him around, like, do good acting, just film it. But yeah, so he's all these great films and other films outside of 1939, of course. But anyway, so my thoughts on Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I was so thoroughly engaged in the story. He was nominated for the Oscar, didn't win it. I think, yeah, he won it for Philadelphia Story the year afterwards, and many thought that it was kind of like an apology of sorts to the fact that he didn't rightfully win it for Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington. But this, one thing I think I said on my Twitter page was that I was looking forward to this being a really good film. But I was ultimately disappointed. It didn't meet that expectation. It only ended up being simply one of the best films I've ever seen in my entire life, and I'm not being facetious in that. I think that this is a masterpiece in some respects. From the way that it's shot and stuff, not overly so, but it's a very well shot film. But the performances, there is I forget his character's name now, but the character played by Claude Rains. Great character, fantastic performance, and throughout the whole film, I'm looking at this guy and I'm thinking he's got this like shock white hair, and I'm thinking he doesn't look that old to have hair that white, but and I don't think I've ever seen this guy before, but hey, what a great actor, And it was towards like the last few minutes of the film, I saw in one of the, because, in high definition, you see some of these flaws a little bit more. I thought, oh, that's a wig actually, isn't it? I thought, why would he wear a wig? I was like, is that actor someone I know? It's Claude fucking Rains. What a legend that he is. I love that actor. And I couldn't believe that it was him, and I didn't realize throughout the whole film. I don't know whether that says something about my inability to recognize a great actor like Claude Rains, or whether it was just, the makeup was good, or whether he just disappeared into that role and I just didn't see it. And the final moment of the film wrecked me, absolutely just buckled me. Like I almost sobbed. I was so overcome with emotion. It was so fucking powerful. What a film. Absolutely loved it. That'd be one to watch again. Well, like maybe once every couple of years for the rest of my life. Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington. Phenomenal film. Absolutely, just 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. And it's sometimes all you need in a film is great performances, but it had something more than that. And the ideals that this guy had, and seeing even at the beginning when he is appointed senator, and he's there and they're giving a party and stuff, and this. And I'll mention this again in the single review of it, but when the Boy Scouts that he was involved with run up and they've all chipped in to buy him a briefcase to hold all his notes in when he gets to the Senate, and Old Lang Syne is playing, and there's just this kid who's kind of like a little bit moved by the situation, and James Stewart's there, and you can tell he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, But that Old Lang Syne is just such a stirring piece of music for me. I don't know what it is. And that playing over that exchange and that kind of seeing how much he meant to those boys and knowing how they'd set up the corruption he was heading into was a really emotional moment for me to start the film proper, because it totally sets up that this is a guy of like outstanding like moral quality, and commands a lot of respect. Not commands respect, but has earned, rightfully a lot of respect from these young boys, these young impressionable kids, and he is, this is a pure soul going into a very impure situation, and so the stakes are already very, very high, and that sets up without you don't really know him that well at the beginning. That really set just the way that kid was looking at him. And that's something that's so great about movies, that just a look from a character will do so much. If you place it in the right place and you have a good performer delivering it, and that kind of eye line is kind of simulated through editing two shots together, and you see James Stewart looking at the kid, and kind of that flicker of uncertainty on his face. Amazing performance, especially in the end, but throughout the whole film. The ebbs and flows and the kind of the upbeat kind of personality he has, and how that gets chipped away, and how despondent he gets, and then And that fire that he brings at the end, and that whole sequence, the filibuster, is just, I think, one of the great sequences in like American cinema. To me, it's just like really gripping. And I loved the guy who played like I don't even know what you'd call him, the head of the Senate or whatever, because he's sitting there and he's seeing what James Stewart's like. He sees the potential in this guy, and he sees that, okay, there's shit going on here that I'm aware of, that I'm not, I can't really come out and say it, but if someone's going to challenge it, then they're going to challenge it, and he's really amused by it. And just his little kind of, stroking his mouth a little bit and looking over, his brilliant little performance from the guy who played the kind of the president, or not the president, but like, the head of the Senate, or the chancellor. I don't know who he is, the supreme chancellor. The attempt on my life has left me scarred. No, I don't know, but he was a brilliant part of the film as well. Jean Arthur was fucking great. The dialogue she's delivering, such a great character, and she's such a fully formed character. And Thomas Mitchell was great in his part too. Again, it's just a film full of really great, complete performances, and it's a great story, just told to perfection. One of the best films I've ever seen, and that was some of the films I've watched over the past couple of months, and that was a really long video. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see. We'll catch up and do this again someday. But it's kind of stressful because, again, like, there's so much, and some of these will get a couple of individual reviews, but I don't know about because I would love to have done individual videos on all of these, but it's the time it takes to do that, and kind of, I don't know. Because I'm thinking about now how long it's going to take to edit this video, which is like almost an hour and 45 minutes long. I was like, well, maybe I could have just done single videos, but no, because some things you can kind of gloss over, and you don't need to do a full video on, I suppose. And also watching a lot of these films in quick rapid fire succession, daily, you don't retain everything, So the way I used to do it, where I'd watch a film or two from my Blu-ray collection every week, and then do a video on them, I'd be really, really like razor sharp and fresh on them. Some of these not so much. Obviously, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, I felt so strongly about it that a lot of it was very fresh in my mind, even though I watched it a few weeks ago, but the character names are gone. So some of those, then I don't have the time to sit here and look and remember all the character names before I do the video, that kind of thing, Yeah, it's just one of those things. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
He's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause